that are a blessing to you as a grandparent, we want to welcome you to tonight's show. So, thanks so much for being able to join us tonight and come into the live session as we get started. So, for each of you ladies that are with us tonight, we're going to cover this topic that is really heartfelt to a lot of ladies that are out there, and really to us parents, specifically a mother who is looking for some direction and some guidance. And there might be some of you out there as well that might be looking for that. So we are not going to hold it off any longer to get started. I want to introduce you to the amazing host at the King's Table, the best grandma, glamma, nana, whatever you want to call her, our own Mama Esther. Mama James, go ahead and take it away.
Whoa, whoa, wow. What an introduction. Thank you. And again, with Kimmy, welcome to the King's Table. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we are really excited to share some really good information with all of you about being a grandparent. But just for a few moments, when we think about the book of Esther, we want to start thinking about a woman who had to figure out how to live life in situations that were tough. And I know as a mother, now that I've released my children into adulthood and they are now raising their children, all 9 of my grandchildren, I now have to learn how to live a different way and a creative way around being a grandmother and being a mother to adult children. So some of the names, Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity of being together. Bless our time together and bless our guests that will be joining us in just a few moments. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and bring them on right now. I want to introduce to you our first guest. Her name is Miss Camille Chacon. Camille, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do in your world?
Yes, good evening, ladies, and whoever else is joining us. It's such an honor to be part of just a integral part of God's family. And so I am the president of a nonprofit group called the Alms with Love World Ministry. And our ministries focuses mainly on helping people be restored back to life. And so we have international ministries in Costa Rica, and then we have local ministries in Sacramento. I have 3 grown sons, and 2 of those sons have children. And I have, with one son, I have 3 teenagers. I have Ryan, Reese, and Riley that are twin granddaughters that are 14 and a grandson that's 16. And then my other son has 2 children, that Pierce and Gabriella, 9 and 6.
Great, thank you. So now let's welcome my other guest, Miss Diana. Tell us all about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Diana Martinez. I work for the state of California. I'm a manager, and I am a grandmother. I have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, and my daughter blessed me with 2 beautiful grandchildren. They're 10 and 11 years old, a boy and a girl, and I just enjoy life. I enjoy having them and just living life.
Great, thank you very much. So let me real quick, before we go any further, let me show you what all of our worlds look like. This is the world of mine, Mama James. I have 9 grandchildren, and I live every day to be a wonderful example to them. And for Camille's world, these are her beautiful, wonderful 5 grandchildren, and they are fabulous, trust me. And then we have our own sister Diana. These are her blessings, and she has wonderful children. So tonight we're going to get to hear a lot about what goes on in the life of a grandmother and how we can do it and do it well. So what are some of the names that we get to call ourselves? Let me tell you, I went online and I looked and I found some great things. We are called Nanas, Grandma, Glamma, Nina, Gigi, Mama, Gma, Bama, Noma, Nana, Nanny, Mimi, Grams, and Grammy. And the list went on and on and on. I don't want to bore you with the rest of those, but I just want to let you know we think grandparenting is the best thing that ever happened in the world. So one of the things we really want to make sure as we think about the book of Esther, that grandparenting and being a grandparent can be a lifesaver to our children. We should be able to reinforce discipline strategies, give good sound biblical, and we're going to really use biblical principles tonight, not worldly principles, although worldly behaviors and techniques are very applicable. But more than anything, we got to really make sure that we're teaching what the Word of God says when we're breathing into the lives of our children and their children. We want to make sure we know that we buy way too many toys and clothes, so we don't even have to go that way. We know we do that. And we provide a very intricate service. We babysit, we take care, we love, we do whatever we can in being grandparents because we're really excited about it. But what can happen? Grandparenting can go bad really fast. Women, I want you to understand this can go downhill really fast. And what does downhill look like? It looks like your children could take your grandchildren from you and not let you see them. It may be your daughter, but she's married to her significant other. He may get upset or she may get upset and withdraw those grandkids from you. Our goal tonight is to give you some wonderful tips and tools and just to increase your prayer life and use strategies to prevent that from happening. So the role of a grandparent is one of the best roles in the entire world. And I tell everyone, ladies, this is what I tell everyone. If God gave me grandkids first, I would tell him to keep my kids. So that's what I would tell him. So Kimmy, why don't you go ahead and start us out in our interviews tonight, and we'll go from there.
All right. All right, great. All right, so this is going to be my first question, and I'm going to start off with you, Dr. James. If you can tell us what is one of the moments for you that a heartfelt moment that made you a grandparent? What was really scary about it, and what was most exciting about that, being a grandparent?
Oh, woo, what was the most? Let me do exciting first. When I first heard I was going to have a grandchild, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was scared because I did not know if my kids were ready. But when that little baby came here and I sat in the hospital room and they put little Zion in my arms, there was not a greater feeling in the world. Now, we're not talking about outside of my salvation and marriage, but to see something that produced through the lines, the words are never, I can't get the right words, but I'll tell you what, I thank God every day. He is 17 years old, and I tell him today, you know what? I wake up every morning and I say, God, I love Zion. I thank God for him. Not only Zion, but all of my grandchildren, to get that straight. Thank you.
Yeah. So Diana, tell me about the first time when you learned that you were going to be a grandmother. What did you want to be called?
Nana. I wanted to be called Nana because my kids call my mom grandmother because my grandmother, we would call her Nana. So I said, okay, this way there's no mix up. I am Nana. There's not like which grandma. And I love them to call me Nana. It's different and it's special. And that's what they can call me.
That's awesome. That's great. Camille, how about for you? Camille, tell me, what do your grandchildren call you? And did you pick that name or did they give that name to you?
They've gone from Nana to Grandma Crandy, and Crandall was my maiden name. So kind of Grandma Crandy just kind of stuck. But when I first found out I was going to be a grandmother, I was going through a really painful divorce, and the timing coincided with the birth of my first grandchild, and my heart just felt like it had been, my love tank had just been like filled up with the excitement of turning my morning into dancing. And to this day, like Kathy with Zion, my first grandson represents to me almost kind of new life. And it also kind of represented just some sadness with me because I knew as a mom raising my kids, I hadn't always been present. And so this was kind of my opportunity to really just really be engaged and really be a present grandma. So it was a beautiful time of healing and also growth for me.
That's great. So when I think about, like you just said, from your very first grandchild to your next grandchild, Dr. James, you have 9 of them. So from Zion to the baby Josiah, does the love, excitement, or does it change from one grandchild to the next?
Let me tell you what I've learned about God through having multiple grandchildren. It makes me feel like I understand God a little bit more because my love just increases. I don't know how God could love so many people until you have grandchild 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I want you all to know I am one of 62 grandchildren. 62 grandchildren. And I know that my big mama loved them all equally. And as a matter of fact, I think every one of us thought we were the special one. And we touted that with such joy. So my love just gets more and more. My heart is filled up all the time with all of the grandchildren that I have. Never an empty space, never in my heart.
That's good. All right. So let me ask you this, Diana. As we talk about grandparents and going into grandmothering, there always becomes that subject about what does it look like when you have to consider doing something like correcting a grandchild, right? So you have the parent there or not present, but you have to correct and you have to redirect your grandchild. How do you do that without being in the parent role?
Well, my situation, my grandchildren and my daughter, we all live together. So what I do is I follow her lead. How she disciplines, I follow that. So when I see they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or something that if they do or say something that isn't correct, I do pull them to the side. Of course, I'm nicer to them than I was to my kids, right? I don't yell at them. I just go, come here, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. And they know that's like, Nana has her serious face. And then I like to talk to them. I don't spank them. I have put them in timeout when they were younger. And now that they're bigger, I'll take away the Xbox. I'll say, okay, give me the control and you have to stop playing for whatever time, half an hour, or we need to talk to your mom. So I let them know that there is boundaries. They can't just run me over and do whatever they want when mom's not present.
Can I jump in there? I want to just share a thought as well. When we talk about the book of Esther, we want to remember that in our role as grandparents, we are not the moms. So we have to be very careful and very strategic in how we dish out the discipline, because our kids can get upset with us because this is a new time and a new way. And I can remember too, when I was raising my kids, if someone shared with me something that I should do, I would kind of tell them, I kind of know what it is that I'm doing. So I just want to remind grandparents of a couple of things. One, you are not the mama. You're not the daddy. They have parents. Your role is to assist. And another thing, Kimmy, let's throw out there for children who don't have children yet. As grandmothers, it is not our responsibility to pressure our kids to have kids. When we do that, we push them in places that they shouldn't be. When God is ready for them to have grandchildren, they may decide they don't even want them. But once God impresses or that they going to have grandchildren, we come into play at that point. But let's not pressure our kids to have kids because we want them to. It's kind of like Mordecai in the book of Esther. He had to remind her of her responsibilities, but he didn't force her to do something that she didn't want to do out of her heart. So as grandparents, let's remember that we want to help our children and not hurt them.
Yeah, that is a really good point. So Camille, I want to ask you this next question. What does it feel like if there's conflict that you might have with with your children and the parenting style that they have? So if their parenting style, Camille, I'm not for sure if you heard the question, but I'll repeat it again. So if you have conflict with how they're parenting and how they're raising the child, how do you deal with that as a grandparent? Camille, can you hear us? Okay. I don't have Camille on. So Camille, can you hear us? All right. She's going to do some adjustments. So let's get Diana. How about you? You can go ahead and answer that for me. How do you deal with the parenting conflicts when your daughter doesn't agree with maybe how you don't agree with how your daughter has maybe parented in an area? Do you challenge that or do you leave it alone?
I don't challenge it. I agree with her with a lot of things. But she always asks for advice and things like that. But when she was married, I didn't agree with her husband. So that he's not my son, so I would have to, like in Esther, where Mordecai tells her, don't say anything who you are yet, right? There's a time and a place to say things. So as older seasoned women, Christian women, we should know we slow to speak, right? And so we should think about and pray about what we're going to say, because if I leash out and start an argument in front of the children, in front of my, with my son-in-law, what is that going to create? And then that's going to bring problems for my daughter with her husband, right? So I've been married. I know how things work, right? So what I would do is I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't say anything at the moment. And I would just ask the Lord to help me bite my tongue. And I would pray about it and kind of walk away, give it a while. And then after a while, pull him over to the side privately. And I talk to him about the situation and how, as time goes on, that could be damaging, or it could turn into a worse situation once the kids become teenagers. Because what you're doing now, you're getting the overall goal is how are you setting them up to be successful,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. So Camille, are you back on?
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity real quick to answer. Part of that is, how do you deal with the conflicts that you don't probably agree with the way that your children are parenting? And you have boys, right? So how do you deal with your boys?
Actually, that's a key factor, because with boys, I mean, they're just like matter of fact. I want to talk to them about something. It's like, Mom, get it over with. Let's not talk about emotions. But I've learned to, conflicts have come up. And one of the first things I do is I mean, truthfully, I share with trusted friends kind of my position, because I'm not, I want to make sure that I think I'm right and I want to be right, but I don't always trust that I might be right. I might have, emotional issues that is making me feel that way. So obviously I talk to friends, and I mean, I don't talk to a lot of friends. I talk to maybe a few trusted confidants, who I trust their opinion, and obviously I pray first if I'm going to have a discussion with my sons, and I want them to recognize that I have wisdom, and that they might be seeing things just one-sided with their family and their kids. And so, that's typically, the way I handle those situations. And I think that with thinking about the book of Esther, one of the things that I think about Mordecai, and, Mordecai, raising Esther, had a lot of wisdom that he must have imparted to her from the time he started to raise her until she went to the palace. So, just that ability to share wisdom, whether it be from a son to a mother, or a grandmother to, her son. I mean, I just think that recognizing that as grandparents, we have life experiences and years that give us wisdom, and that it's like we want to open ourselves up to our kids to listen to it. And sometimes they may not want to hear it, but I need to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we look at, as a parent and as a daughter versus a son, I believe that boys are matter of fact. Let's get to the point. And as a daughter, sometimes when my mother will share things with me, I really have to take it to heart, and I have to kind of process it and be with it in the moment and think about it. Whereas I think with the boys, as I explain things to them, they're just like, let's get to this and let's get it over. So Mom, how do you feel when you have to tell me something and you think that maybe it might be a conflict to me, or I might not understand it, or it might have a little bit of a drifting in there? How do you feel about that personally?
I know sometimes that's a great question, and I'm enjoying the conversation so much. I think we're giving some great tips and being very transparent. And Kimberly, I think for me, I'm always cognizant that it's not just you making decisions alone. I respect the fact of the relationship that you have and that you have a dual obligation to your child and to your partner. So when I'm sharing parenting tips and tools, I'm always trying to consider what are you hearing from the other end so that you don't feel challenged and compromised. Well, my mom is saying I need to do this, my husband is saying I need to do this, and then the world is saying I need to do something different. So one of my best strategies that I've ever used, and I'm really going to lean in on the book of Esther. I pray. And when I tell you all I fast, and I fast for each one of my kids because I know that I know what I deposited into you. It's like when you go to the bank. I remember when I was a little girl, my big mama had a little black book. How many of you remember this? I want you to shake your heads with me. Do you remember going to the bank with a little black book, a little
Yes.
leather book, and you would go to the counter and the parents would put money in and they would stamp it with a stamper? So when I'm talking to my children, I know that I had a little black book and I made deposits. So Kimmy, when I share with you, I know that I can open up that black book and get a withdrawal because I know what I put in. I know what I put in there. So when we as parents, when we are trying to help our children raise their children or contribute to, you really need to first think about what did you put in? What did you put in?
Yes.
So you can't go to your kids and tell them you need to consider, and let's learn to watch our words. Don't tell them what they need to do. Don't tell them what they got to do. But what you can do is you can say, you might want to consider the following. And if you know you put it in, then you can ask for a withdrawal. But if you didn't put it in, your conversation needs to look something like this. Dear sweet Kimmy, I really wish when you were growing up, I would have done the following. Right, Sister Diana? I wish I would have done the following, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. But would you be willing to consider trying it like this? Because I believe it works. Now that I'm older, I'm more mature, and all my kids are gone, I see how to do everything right. So today, Kimmy, that's how I do it. When I share tips and tools with you, now don't get me wrong. There's some matter of fact stuff. Mordecai told Esther, look, girlfriend, don't think if you're sitting over there in your pretty mansion that you're going to get by. If you don't rise to this occasion, you're going to die. And that's what I say to the grandparents today. We must save a nation. And how do we save that nation? We save this nation by asking God to teach us how to breathe into the lives of our children as they breathe into the lives of their children.
Yeah, that is, and there is conversations where my mom is like, this is matter of fact, and I know the difference between this is what I would consider, and this is what you need to do to save your child. One area personally that I want to talk about that it really has a big influence is like the nutrition. As a young mother, we struggle so much with trying to get good nutrition for our children and sit them down and have good meals, right? But we were raised on like everything was around food. Everything is around parties and events and having food. And my mom had to, as we got older, she said, I apologize to you for everything being about food. Now it's about how do you live? We need to know how to live and not live to eat, but just enough food to be able to live. And so I now had to transition that. And so she said, this is what I did, but I want you to consider this for your children now, because as I've gotten older, I've seen this and how it affected you all. And I don't want you to feed that into your children. So that's an example that I could think about of that. It's an option, but it kind of a matter of fact, if you want your children to not have high blood pressure, diabetes, strokes, heart attacks, you would want to consider this to be in the best interest of your child. And as a responsible parent, I should be willing to listen to that and take it in and eat, like they say, eat the fish and spit out the bones. So
yeah, that's good.
But when, Diana, let me ask you this. When your grandchildren start to get to a place, or when you start to feel like your children aren't taking in what you want them to take in, how do you gracefully, not you personally, because you and Camille, I don't see this at all, but how does a grandparent gracefully step back and say, okay, if I can't tell my child how to do this, maybe, they won't get an attitude. Like, how does a grandparent not get an attitude? How do they not, well, I just won't help you. No, I'm not going to babysit you because you won't babysit for you because you won't listen to me. I'm not going to give your kid any money because you won't do what I tell you to do for your child. How does a grandparent really handle that without sabotaging a relationship with their child or grandchildren?
I think when the relationship starts with your child since they were a child. If you had conflict when they were growing up, you're going to have conflict when they're adults. And so sometimes you don't see eye to eye because you never did see eye to eye. So as the older person, as the seasoned person, as the Christian grandma, and you want to see your grandkids, dangling a carrot of, well, if you don't do this, they're not your teenager where maybe when you were raising them, you would say, okay, well, you're not going to get this if you don't do that. There's no bargaining. There's not a bargain that happens. In the book of Esther, what I see there is the relationship that Esther had with Mordecai. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of respect. She believed what he said, but it was something that started since they were young. Now, if you didn't do this when they were young and you don't have that relationship, it's not too late. It's never too late for Jesus. He's a God of second, third, 5, 10 chances. So I would say if there's a lot of conflict, pray about it. Pray about it before you talk to a child, because they're an adult. Just like you have your own thoughts and your own ways, they have their own ways.
So Kimmy, it looks like Diana froze on us there, so we'll let her come back in.
Yeah, so then I was going to go to Camille and I was going to ask for you, how do you gracefully come out of a situation? What advice could you give to a grandparent to gracefully come out of a situation when they're not in agreement with their child?
Well, I think that
Okay, we have Camille going out too. All right, Camille, can you hear us? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Camille. Okay, we can't get Camille either. So Dr. James, I'm going to go ahead and move to you. So let me know, how can you tell people gracefully how to come out of situations when they're having to deal with the parents and the grandchildren like that?
Are you talking about specifically when there's a challenge on behaviors or an incident that took place?
So thanks for clarifying that. So this is more specifically when a parent feels like they need to back off. When you feel like, when the parent is saying, I really need you to back off. I really need you to not do this with my child. Or I really need you to tell me not what to do with my child. How do you stop from getting upset as a grandparent? Because your best interest is really to want to help your child, but they don't see it that way. They see it as you pressuring them. What advice could you give to a grandparent to say, don't sabotage a relationship because you didn't like the response of your child?
Yeah. That's a great question. And actually, I have experienced that before. And I have a daughter-in-law, Miss Jessica, and she is absolutely wonderful. And she has just really coached me and taught me. She has the ability she knows what she wants for her child, and she knows that I'm over the top. So when I enter in situations that is not the direction she wants for her children, she kindly just says to me, Mama James, that's not the way I do it. And I don't take offense to that. I take a deep breath and I say, thank you for sharing. Tell me how you want me to do it. And then when she taught me how she wants it done, I respect her. So your question is twofold. One, how do we back off? And two, how do we not get angry and withhold things from them? I actually have friends who have said, well, if they don't let me do it my way, I'm not giving the kids anything. That is not what Esther did. Esther did not go to Mordecai or to the people of the kingdom and say, if you guys don't do this my way, we're not doing it at all. She didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that she had to find the right way to do it. And let me give you another example of that. After Esther took her bath for 12 months and it was time for her to go to the king said, okay, you've had your bath. You don't stink anymore. You're not smelly, because remember, women, our lives have to be presentable to go before the king. And that's what God requires of us too. And if we're going to be good grandparents, we have to wash our thoughts out. We have to wash our ways and thoughts and feelings off of us and listen to what it is that's being said by the parent, because God gave the kids to them, not to us. So before Esther even got to go before the king, her private attendant said to her, you have everything that you already need to get before the king. So that's what we have to do. I said to my sweet daughter, Jessica, when she told me that she didn't do it that way, I said, oh, I am so happy that you felt comfortable enough to tell me what it is that you wanted me to do, because I don't want to ever overstep my bound. So as women, we have a responsibility to listen for words that are said and not said, because we think because we're mama, and that's the worst thing you could ever do, mothers. Those of you that are listening and tuning in on today, the worst thing you can ever do is assume the role. Just because you're the mama, you got the right to say and do anything. You got the right to say and do what you want to do in your four walls to Jesus. But even to your grown kids, you don't have the right, and you don't get the golden stick to go say anything you want to say. Our children belong to God. Our grandchildren belong to God, and they deserve respect. They deserve honor, just like you do, so that they'll continue to let us see our grandkids. We don't want them to take them away from us. I have another daughter-in-law, Miss Makia. When her little kids would come over, Makai and Nia, they like to dance to music. And I love watching them just dance and, kind of jump around in a circle and kick their feet up. So one day I was talking to her and she says, Ma, I don't want my kids dancing to that music. You know what? I never even heard the music. I never heard the music that they were dancing to. I was excited that they were just moving. And I thought, oh God, look at my little grandbabies moving. But when I stopped and listened to the words of the music, I thought, oh my God, what was I thinking of? They're dancing to something that would sound absolutely crazy. Did I get upset with her for that? No, I respected her. So now when they come over and they want to dance and jump, I say, hold up. Does your mama let you listen to that? Because if your mama don't let you listen to it, don't put it on me. Mm-hmm. So that's how you get yourself out of bad situations. Talk to your sweethearts and say to them, what is it that you want? How can I better serve you? And that's another big word, women. Learn to serve your children in order to serve your grandchildren. Everyone does not have to serve us. It's not about us. Let's learn to serve them during this very critical time of raising our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And that's so true about Jessica. She will just, there's a one time I was watching her babies, and it doesn't even have to be with the in-laws. I was just watching him, both of the little girls. And I think I had laid one down while I was getting another one dressed. And she just kindly, like, she didn't want the one on the floor. So she just kindly came and picked up the one and took her off. And while I was dressing the other one, and we need to be able to look for signs, just as parents, as grandparents, look for those signs in between the line when, if you're doing something, maybe let's say an example would be if someone has twins and they have a certain way of holding them. And I think Camille could probably speak to this, is if, somebody's doing something a certain way and they like it that way, don't interject. Let them be until they ask for help, and they will learn to ask for help as they need it. So Camille, tell us, is there a time or a situation where you may have felt like, oh man, I got out of my lane, and you had to maybe go back and apologize or step back a little bit and say, okay, what can I do to correct this?
Camille, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. Are you muted, or is your make sure your device is good to
Okay, you
go?
want to come back in again,
Okay.
Camille? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kimmy.
we'll have Camille go out, and let's have Diana. How about for you? Your grandchildren live with you, and so have you ever had a time where you're like, oh, I probably did overstep my boundaries? How did you correct that?
I think I did when I started taking them to church with me, and I'm a little over the top too. I went shopping. I got them. I didn't ask. Took them shopping. I got him a suit and tie, bow tie shoes, and I got her a dress and shoe. I mean, I was so excited that they were coming to church with me, and when I got back, I did notice that I think I went over the top. I was like, I'll help take care of the little clothes because you have to wash it special, and it's just extra work that I added to her, and then. Well, help me get them ready. Like I'm trying to get myself ready because I want to look cute for church, but I needed her to help me get them ready, even though I'm the one that invited them to go to church.
Yeah.
So I added a burden to her, not a burden, but more work for her. And but we worked it out. So on Saturday we talked about it, and she was like, I was just too hurried, Mom, in the morning, we're very close, so she'll just tell me, so that's what comes to mind. So we said, okay, on Saturday night, I'll help you get all their stuff ready, and that way they're ready for Sunday morning to get ready. It just goes smoother.
All right, good. Great. All right, Camille, are you back on? Can you hear me?
I am here.
Okay, great. So you heard the question about maybe you overstepped your boundaries out of a lane. How did you get back into that lane, and what happened? What transpired?
Well, actually, it kind of hit a nerve when you were talking about the nutritional part, because one of my sons and daughter-in-law are just very conscious about nutrition and candy and sugar and gluten-free and dairy-free and no cheese. So it got a little overwhelming for me, and I tried, but there were times that I just said, well, forget it. I'm going to give the kids an egg or cheese. And, it was just a little self-righteous of me. And I recognized I was totally out of my lane. This is out of, not my business. I needed to honor their request. And the way that I got out of it is my grandson ratted me out and told my dad that I fixed him an egg. So, and I just had to come clean. And the beautiful thing, and I think I can't remember who said it, but I think us being transparent with our kids and saying, look, I messed up. I might not have done it the right way, or even in, raising my kids when, I was not present with them. I've had conversations with them where I've talked about, look, I've made mistakes and please forgive me, but I want the best relationship with you, best relationship with my grandkids. And I'm willing to kind of take myself out of it, because it really is all about us, and we make things about our way. So it's humbling, but we're not their mamas, with our grandkids. And, that was my experience. So,
yeah, that sounds, and that's, that's great, and that's a great example. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. One thing I do want to touch on in sitting back in this position, as I listen to all of you as a parent, what I want to say to the other moms out there and to the dads out there that are listening is, give grandparents a little bit of extra grace and mercy when they need it, because they will need it. But it's so fun. What I think about now of being a grandparent, the best thing now is that you can totally hook them up on sugar. You can take them everywhere, and then you can give them back at the end of the day. Like grandparents, the beautiful job of a grandparent is that we can really depend on you all to take them out, to show them the world, and then to bring them back to us. And they tell us all these ventures that they had with Mima and Mama and Nana and Grammy. And we could just soak that in and say, wow, even if I didn't get to do it as a child, my child gets to do it. And so to be able, for those parents that are out there, is sometimes let your hair down, let loose when the parent, if your child is, first of all, it's a blessing if your child has a grandparent. So I highly, highly would just recommend and suggest that you don't take away that moment from a grandparent that they've been waiting all their life for this opportunity to do some things with that child. As much as you can take it in and sit back and let them enjoy being a grandparent, as long as it doesn't affect the health, the welfare, and the mental stability of that child, allow them to grandparent them, as long as they're doing it well. But that transitions me into, are they doing it well? And what does well look like for you all? And so that's something that you have to come into with your family, and you have to sit down with the grandparent. But I want to know from you, Dr. James, how do I tell you that you are overstepping your boundaries? How do I, as a parent, say that? Tell me, what do I say as a parent to you if you are overstepping boundaries?
Wow. I'm going to answer that. And then we have a couple comments on the chat line I'd like to answer as well. How should a child tell their parent they're overstepping their bounds? I think if you've matured in your relationship as a parent and you respect your adult child as an adult who is now in their own relationships with their partners and they're raising their children, they have a right to sit down and say to you, Mom, I really appreciate the things that you want to do for me and for my kids, but that's not how I want to do it. So I don't want you to be upset. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I really need you to respect this area. Now, if that parent gets upset, that means there's something wrong with the parent. And I really mean this to those of you that are listening. If your child tells you that they don't want you doing an activity, a behavior, or buying up. My little granddaughter was over a couple of weeks ago, and I just buy all kind of good goodies and snacks that I know may not always be what their parents want. But my little granddaughter, she looked over at me and she says, Nana, you have the best snacks in the world. And my heart just ran back to the store and bought twice as much. You know, and when I told her mother that, she goes, yeah, when they come over here, they know they're just going to be able to have whatever they want. So, but until their parents tell me, you know, we don't want them to have those things, I become a little bit more aware of buying at the grocery store, the sugar content, if it's all natural juice versus, you know, additives and stuff. I look at those kind of things. But if you're upset because your child calls you out on something, that means you need to go back to prayer. It really means that you need to do like Esther, you need to go fast because they're not your kids. And to the parents, and I'll answer this one through one of the comments, the question says, everything you all are talking about is nice, but what about the kids that are crazy? And I'm going to tell you this right now, I do not use negative words with my kids or my grandkids. So I will pardon you tonight and use that because you asked it in the question. But I believe the Bible says that we are to call those things that are not as though they are. So when you call your kids crazy, they're going to act crazy. So I don't call my kids crazy and I don't call my grandkids crazy. But your question says, what do you do when you have kids that are crazy and over the top and they want to leave their kids with you for too long, or they get mad when you're not available? Well, that's going to go back to my little black book of going to the bank. Whatever you deposit into the bank account is what you get out of the bank account. So if you allowed and you taught the behavior that it was okay for your children to bring their kids and leave them for too long and then get mad because you're not available, that's what you deposited into their spirit. We teach people how to treat us, and it looks like this. Kimmy, would you like me to babysit for you tonight while you go to the movies?
Yes, please.
What time will you be here?
I'm thinking maybe about midnight. Is that okay?
Absolutely. So you're going to drop them off at my house at 7 o'clock and you're going to pick them up by midnight. So you know what I say to her? I need you to be here by 12:15. Not 1 o'clock in the morning, not 2 o'clock the next day, but 12:15. And if you violate that, the next time you ask me, I'm saying no. Because now I'm going to start teaching you a new behavior because apparently you didn't get it. Now, we're not talking about an emergency. We're not talking about something that went haywire. We're talking about you giving your kids permission. Can everybody repeat after me the word permission?
Permission.
The reason for that is we give people permission on how to treat us and how to respect us. Just like we need to respect our children, we also teach them how to respect us. So to the answer to that question is, look at what you deposited into the spirit of your child when you were teaching behaviors that these things were okay. And the Bible says that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. How you train that child when they are little is how they're going to perform when they become older, how they respect you, how they treat you, and how they treat others. So I admonish you today, become like Esther, take a bath, ask God what I need to take a bath in, what part of my spirit needs to be fixed and cleaned and washed up, so that I can start teaching my children a better behavior. And they changed the word from saying that my children are not crazy, but they're unsaved. So thank you for that. I appreciate your acknowledgement with that. So now let's talk about how do we work with our children who are unsaved and they expect you to do and perform non-respected tasks, such as still dropping them off too soon. Because see, understand, saved and unsaved don't have nothing to do with how long they expect you to keep their kids. Amen. Have nothing to do with when they drop their kids off and when they pick them up and how long they do it. Nothing to do with saved and unsaved. That still has to do with lifestyle behaviors that you deposited into your children and what they believe they can and cannot do. Now, we pray along with you that God would save your children, and also you work on the behaviors of expectations from and with your children. So I hope that answered your question. If not, you can reach me on Esther Nation. Go to my YouTube, go to my website page and hit me up for an appointment, and we can get you that one-on-one session together.
Yeah, that's really good information.
Diana has a comment.
You want to chime in? Go ahead.
When my daughter first got married and they had the kids, when they first asked me, like they want to go on a date night or something like that, from the very first time they asked me, I sat down with both of them and I said, look, I don't have a problem watching the baby when you guys go out on a date. You know, I understand, it's, you just had the baby. However, this is not a regular thing. I set the boundaries because I was a single mom for many years. So I let them know this is my time to do what I want to do on my weekends. I'm still working full time. I don't want this to become a habit. And they were laughing at me. They thought I go, no, I see a lot of people that their time to be free now that they raise their kids and do stuff, because they're with the grandkids all the time. You need to set your boundaries. Yes, I will, but from the beginning, set the boundaries. And if it's already gone to a level already, then you got to regroup. And they say, okay, this is how it's going to be from now on. This is my time. This is the time I have available. Because if you let people run you over, they will. And whether it's your kids, co-workers, your boss, there always has to be boundaries, and we set them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And I will just back that by saying, as a parent and a grandparent, with having grandparents that are willing to watch the children, and or not even available sometimes to watch the children, this goes for anything in life. When somebody asks you to do something and you tell them no, I guarantee you 99% of the time they will find a way. So when you tell your child, no, I can't watch the kids tonight, they're not going out because you won't watch the kids. They will find an alternative. They will actually go and find a babysitter and pay somebody to watch their children. But yet they want to drop them off on you and expect you to watch them and for 2 or 3 days at a time and not give you a penny. That is unfair and it's rude and inconsiderate. So you can always tell them no, and it will be okay. Trust me, they will call you back again to ask you to watch their children. It won't be the last time, because it's a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior until you teach them that otherwise. So as we get ready to wrap up tonight, what I don't want to miss out on is all of you women who are in the church and who are feeding a legacy into your children that were taught from your grandparents or were taught from somebody that were invested in you, is the relationship with Jesus Christ. Having a relationship with Jesus Christ is important. And that's why we're here at the King's Table, is to help women to not be able to get closer to Christ, be able to come closer in their walk. How do you teach that to your grandchildren if a parent is not accepting of Jesus Christ, hasn't not become saved, isn't even thinking about being saved? What do you tell them to help? What do you feed into your grandchildren so that maybe they can be an influence to the parent, or what? Let's talk about that. Camille, what can you do, or what's an example, something that points out in your life? If you could think about something or someone else for that experience.
What I really want to be sure I just mention is I heard something the other day, and it was so powerful because it's the law of the seed. And so it's an intention that as you're raising your grandchildren, or not raising your grandchildren, but having influence on your grandchildren. So it's something I have could create something else I want. And for me, time is a seed, love is a seed, kindness is a seed. I want my grandchildren, I see greatness in my grandchildren, even though they're young and they may not always be perfect children. I see greatness in them. I want them to be world changers. I want them to be missionaries. I want them to be light bearers. So for me, it's very intentional that I preach the gospel at all times, as much as I can, and when necessary, use words. So I want my grandkids to see me being kind. I want them to see me loving. I want them to see me taking time for them. I want them to know. I want them to know the love of Christ through a demonstrable, I think that's the right word, evidence, physical evidence, emotional evidence, spiritual evidence of myself. And, I've used prayer and fasting for my grandchildren and had wonderful testimonies with my grandchildren and their spiritual walk. But it really kind of correlates back to, I really, like with the book of Esther, I really thought more about Mordecai in this whole process, because what he was doing the whole time he was taking care of Esther as a child, he was sowing all those seeds of love, of kindness, of physical care, emotional care. And he showed traits in himself that when it came time for her to go to the king, what did she do? She asked him to fast and pray. Now that was because she had seen him fast and pray. She saw him acting the fool out in the courtyard when he found out that they were going to execute the Jews. They said he was crying loudly. So she saw behavior in him that when it came time for her to save the nation, she knew what to do. And so
Amen.
for us, it's like I have a seed that I want to plant in my grandchildren. I want to see something else come out of it. I want them to go further than I've been. I want them to love the Lord, more than I do, if it's possible. I want them to do more things for a kingdom purposes. So for me, it's just, the story of Esther is so beautiful. And I want to really dig more into it, because it really is not just about what happened with Esther and Mordecai. It goes way back. And I think about Esther was a King Darius II, and he was the one that rebuilt the temple. Now, can you imagine that never occurring? So it was through Esther, her obedience, her courageous actions, her faithfulness to Mordecai, listening to his wisdom, that the nation was saved and the temple was rebuilt. So
That's right.
Camille, you bring up some really good points. I want to interrupt you right there because I have quite a few more things. We have a couple of questions. And I'm so happy to hear you say, oh, I'm going to dig into the book of Esther. I think so many people have missed the book of Esther and the book of Ruth as well. Because we just see these little books in the Bible and we kind of skip through them and we just, oh, that sounds pretty good. But remember, women, God was never mentioned in the book of Esther. Esther didn't have a guide or a Holy Spirit leading her on what to do, but she trusted the instinct of a loving person figure in her life. And that's what we are to our grandchildren. We are figures. We are the spiritual figures in our grandchildren's lives. And when Camille just said, I have a seed that I want to deposit into my grandchildren, that is exactly what we have to do. We are depositing something into their lives. And I so appreciate one of the comments that we had a few moments ago from Kathy. She said, we as grandparents, we are not obligated to do anything for our grandchildren. We do it because we love them. And that is the truth. It's out of love that we do. So we don't want our children to stifle that love. We don't want to hurt that love. We don't want to damage that love. And it all equates around trust. And that's what Esther had to do. She had to trust the voice, the teachings, and the leading of Mordecai so that an entire nation could be saved. And women, you need to know how powerful you are. One of the other questions that we just got is, how do you love your grandchildren from a blended family in a way that they feel loved as your biological grandchildren? So, Kimmy, I'm going to answer that question because we're in that situation. Kimmy has 2 stepchildren, and we don't call them stepchildren, but I call them out so that they're my bonus children. Thank you for that correction. But I wanted to make it clear to everyone. But I don't treat my 2 little grandsons any different than I do her child. When I give Christmas gifts, I give equal. When their birthdays, I give equal. I want those kids to know that they are just as important to me as Kimmy's birth child. Why is that? Because one day God's going to look at me and God's going to ask me, did I share the love of Jesus Christ? It doesn't matter where they came from. They are human beings and they are children that God created, and they deserve as much love and attention and respect regardless to how they came in the relationship. So we must, when we say the word blended family, and in a couple of weeks we have a couple wonderful guests that will be sharing with us about how to manage a blended family successfully. We have a lot of great topics coming up because we know this is important to our lives today, especially when we look at the book of Esther. Remember, Esther was a blended child herself. So we're going to get into that. But God chose her to be the queen of a nation and saved a nation. And yes, she came from a blended family and God loved her. The king adored her and told her she could have anything up to half the kingdom. So women of God, just remember that tonight. When you talk about loving our blended children. Another question says, what are realistic expectations of a grandparent from an adult child for non-biological grandchildren? That's a great question. So Kimmy, you have that situation. I'm going to answer my part. I'll let you answer your part first, and I'll kind of run off of that one. What are realistic expectations that you might have from your parents for your children?
Yeah, so my expectation is the same thing that I would have for the biological child. So when I say, can you watch the children, I'm not saying, can you just watch my child? There's already an expectation that if you're going to watch the one, you're going to watch the other 2. So when I say I'm bringing the kids over, I'm bringing 3. And I take them with me when I go over there. When Christmas comes, there is an expectation that you are getting all of the kids' gifts. There is an expectation that when the kids come over to your home, you're going to treat them all the same. But that starts off from the parents' morals and their values, right? The grandparent. So as a grandparent, you have to say, I am going to make sure that my child, my daughter, my son has this, that I'm going to respect anyone and everyone that they bring over. It might be an adopted child. It doesn't even have to be, you know, a child that's your daughter might go out and adopt someone, and that same love and respect has to be there. And the expectation is, mom, dad, this child is a part of me. It's a part of my life and my relationship. I come as a package to you. And a parent's unbounding, unconditional love is going to be able to accept whatever you bring to them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So what I want to do is give you some tips, grandparent tips. And we have about 8 more minutes here. And I'm going to ask our guests, you have 1 minute to give a parent tip. And then I'm going to do a real quick wrap up. Sister Diana, what's the most important tip that you would give grandparents today? 1 minute.
Share Jesus with your grandchildren. Share Jesus.
Beautiful, beautiful tip. Camille.
I agree with Diana. And then I would say to see the greatness in your grandchildren. See the greatness in your children. I mean, don't you know that Mordecai saw something in Esther that he would make a comment about her being born for such a time as this? I'm sure he saw greatness in her. So I just see that's what I would say.
Great. Thank you very much. And to parents, I just want to share this with you. To grandparents, remember, let your kids raise their kids. They are not your kids. They're not your responsibility to raise. It's your responsibility to ask God to teach you how to share any area of concern regarding those children. Hopefully you are praying and you are fasting and seeking God like Esther for direction. And remember, behaviors that counteract parent teaching that we must never violate. Don't teach your grandchildren to tell little white lies. And it looks like this. Don't tell your mommy or daddy I gave you a cookie. Don't tell your mommy or daddy that I let you watch movies tonight. Those are teaching our grandchildren how to lie. And when we teach them how to lie, they will grow up becoming a liar. And then we will ask why they lie, because you taught them to lie. And then never ask your grandchildren what's going on in their home. It is not your business what's going on in the home of your grandchildren. If you have concerns of what's going on in the home of your children, ask the parent, not the grandchild. Also, posting pictures on Facebook, and I am so guilty of this. If the parents have not given you permission to post all their stuff on Facebook, don't. I'm sorry, Makia. I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry, Kimmy. I'm going to start asking you all permission. When I studied up on that, I went, oops, violated that one. But ask first before you do it. Another thing, don't try to raise grandkids like you raised your grandkids, like you raised your kids. Let your children raise their kids the way they want to raise them, and just pray and ask God that they'll do a very good job. And remember, your kids may not think you did a very good job. Woo-hoo! That's really a time for prayer and fasting, but don't try and tell your kids that they need to raise them just like you did. And then learn how to offer life lessons. Don't just start dumping life lessons into your grandkids. Learn how to offer those life lessons. And some of those lessons you may need to ask your kids permission to share, because maybe they don't want their kids to know that how bad and unruly and things that they did that weren't very nice or kind or whatever. So ask before you do it. And don't always be willing to give your 2 cents about their family structure. What happens over at their address is their address. I tell my kids all the time, I live at 7443 blank, blank, blank street. And what I do over here is my business. What you do over on your street is your business. And I love it just like that. God bless you. And we get along just fine. It works like that. Don't allow your grandkids to do, wear, dance, jump, sing, and do things that their parents don't allow them to do. You violate the very principles that their parents are trying to instill in their children, and it's not fair. Do not display your bad behaviors to your grandchildren. If you smoke, don't smoke with your grandchildren. If you drink, don't drink with your grandchildren. If you go out and party, don't have your grandchildren there. And I tell everybody, I never, ever once allowed people to smoke, drink, and cuss in my home, because I was raising my children with a certain principles and a structure and a godly environment, and I honored it in my home. So there's some things I don't expect my children to do because I didn't do, but you can't expect your children to do that in their home. But don't do those things with your grandchildren, because if you do, you run the risk of not being able to have your grandchildren. So tonight, We thank all of you for joining us at the King's Table. We want to let you know that next week we are going to do what we call a U-turn. We are going back to a topic that I want you to know that took everybody by storm. It's a man's world. We had so many comments. We had so many questions, and we got some great ideas. And guess what we're going to do next week? We are going to bring a man on with us next week. And we're going to be talking about it's a man world. It's a man's world, but it ain't nothing without a woman or a girl. Don't miss next Monday night at 7 o'clock. You will be blessed. We know that God's doing something when this can of worms is open. So please join us next week. So that we can be a blessing to all of you through the word. And again, read the book of Esther this week and ask God to breathe it into your spirit, that you'll start to move differently, be differently, and you'll be able to present yourself to the world as the queen that you are. God bless you. To Sister Diana Martinez, thank you for joining us. To Sister Camille, thank you for joining us tonight. I so appreciate your stories and sharing your children and your lives with us. To Sister Kimmy, my co-host, God bless you. So we say goodbye to you all till next Monday at 7 o'clock. Join us at the King's Table. You can follow me on YouTube. There's a lot of new videos out there that I've been recording on my podcast at the King's Table on Apple, Spotify, all the different platforms. Check it out. God bless you and we love you. And remember, walk as the queen that God has created you to be. God bless you. Goodbye, Sister Diane. I like that pose. God bless you. Thank you to all of you on YouTube at YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for joining.
Good night.